Almost everyone has done this at some point this week, and it feels completely harmless. But there's a very specific reason doctors keep bringing up this habit when they talk about stool getting stuck in the rectum. So let's go straight into what it is and what it's actually doing to your body. Before we talk about the habit itself, it helps to understand exactly what stool stuck in the rectum really means, because it's not the same thing as everyday constipation. Constipation usually means you're going less often than normal, or your stool is harder than usual. Stool stuck in the rectum is more specific than that. It refers to a mass of stool that has become so dry and so hard that it physically lodges in the last few inches of the digestive tract, right where stool is supposed to be stored briefly before it leaves the body. Instead of moving out normally, it sits there sometimes for days, sometimes even longer. In medical terms, this is often called fecal impaction. It's more common than most people assume, and it isn't limited to older adults or people with obvious digestive conditions. It can happen to someone in their 20s who eats reasonably well and exercises regularly. That's part of what makes this particular habit so easy to overlook. It doesn't look like a red flag. It looks like ordinary daily life. So what is this habit exactly? It's the routine act of ignoring or delaying the urge to have a bowel movement, not once in a while, but as a regular pattern. It's the moment your body sends a clear signal that it's time to go, and instead of listening to it, you decide the timing isn't convenient. Maybe you're about to walk into a meeting. Maybe you're out running errands and don't want to use a public restroom. Maybe you're traveling and your body is on someone else's schedule instead of your own. Maybe it's early in the morning and you're already rushing to get out the door. In every one of these situations, the decision feels small. You tell yourself you'll go later, once things settle down, once you're home, once it's more convenient. And for most people, this doesn't feel like a big deal because usually later comes and the urge returns and everything works out fine. The problem isn't the occasional delay. It's when this becomes a routine response, day after day, week after week, until holding it in becomes almost automatic. Some people do this so consistently that they've trained themselves to barely notice the urge at all anymore because they've spent years overriding it. And that's exactly where the real issue begins, because what's happening inside your body during those moments of delay is very different from what it feels like on the outside. On the outside, it feels like nothing. On the inside, a chain of events is quietly getting set in motion, and it has everything to do with how your rectum and your nervous system are designed to work together in the first place. Here's what's actually happening inside your body every time you do that. Your rectum has stretch receptors, small nerve endings built specifically to detect when stool has arrived and is filling that space. When enough stool is present, those receptors fire a signal to your brain, and that signal is what you experience as the urge to go. This system is designed around a fairly short window of opportunity. The signal comes in strong, stays for a while, and then if you don't respond to it, it starts to fade. Your body isn't built to hold that alarm at full volume indefinitely. It's built to prompt you, wait a bit, and then quiet down, whether or not you actually acted on it. So when you ignore that signal on a regular basis, you're not just delaying a bathroom trip. You're teaching your nervous system that this particular alarm doesn't need to be taken seriously. Over time, with enough repetition, those stretch receptors become less sensitive. This is sometimes referred to as rectal hyposensitivity, and it means your body needs a larger amount of stool present before it triggers the urge to go at all. In other words, the alarm that used to go off with a moderate amount of stool now only goes off once there's significantly more built up. That sounds like it might just mean fewer trips to the bathroom, but there's a second part of this process that makes it far more serious. While stool sits and waits, whether because you're ignoring the urge or because your body simply isn't signaling as strongly anymore, your colon continues doing its job in the background, and that job is absorbing water out of the stool. This is normal function, and it's meant to happen over a defined period of time. But when stool lingers in the rectum far longer than it should, that water absorption keeps going well past the point where it's helpful. The result is stool that gets progressively harder, drier, and more compact. Instead of a soft, easily passed stool, you end up with something dense and difficult to move, which then becomes even harder to push out once you do finally try. This is the exact combination that leads to impaction. Reduced sensitivity delays the urge, and that delay allows the stool to dry out and harden, and the harder it becomes, the more difficult and uncomfortable it is to pass, which can lead a person to delay again out of discomfort, continuing the same cycle. In some cases, when this pattern repeats for a long time, the rectal wall itself can begin to stretch to accommodate the growing buildup. This stretching can further blunt the nerve signals, making the urge even less noticeable in the future. Doctors sometimes refer to a significantly enlarged rectum as megarectum, and while that's a more advanced outcome, it illustrates how far this everyday habit can go if it continues unaddressed. What starts as a simple, repeated choice to wait can gradually reshape how your body communicates one of its most basic signals, and that pattern can start reshaping your gut long before you ever notice a symptom. Here's something interesting. Researchers have been puzzled for years by why some countries have dramatically lower constipation rates than the US, even when people there eat way less fiber and breathe far more polluted air. What they eventually traced it back to wasn't diet at all. It was a hidden airborne factor most people are exposed to every single day without realizing it, and a surprising underwater ingredient certain populations have relied on for thousands of years to keep things moving naturally. If you want to see exactly what that hidden factor is, and the ancient superfood tied to it, point your phone camera at the QR code on the screen right now. There's also a link pinned in the comments below. Now, back to what's actually happening inside your body once this habit takes hold. This is why the warning signs are so often missed until the problem is already fairly advanced. Because the changes are happening gradually at the level of nerve sensitivity and stool consistency, most people don't notice anything unusual until the symptoms become hard to ignore. One of the most common signs is a persistent feeling of incomplete evacuation, meaning you go to the bathroom, but you're left with the sense that there's more that didn't come out. Frequent straining is another sign, especially when it becomes a regular part of using the bathroom rather than an occasional occurrence. Some people notice they're going several days without a bowel movement, even when their diet hasn't changed. Others notice their stool has become smaller, harder, or unusually narrow, sometimes described as pencil thin or ribbon-like, which can happen when stool is forced to pass around a partial blockage rather than through a clear path. Bloating and a persistent sense of fullness in the lower abdomen are also common, since the stool sitting in the rectum takes up space and can affect the surrounding organs. One sign that surprises a lot of people is small amounts of loose or watery stool leaking out around the impacted mass. This can look like a new bout of diarrhea, but it's often the opposite problem entirely. Fluid finding its way around a blockage that's already there, rather than a sign that everything is moving normally. Certain situations make this cycle worse, and it helps to know where you might fall on that list. People with jobs that make bathroom access difficult are at higher risk simply because of logistics. This includes teachers who can't step away from a classroom, healthcare workers in the middle of long shifts, delivery drivers, and anyone whose schedule is dictated by someone else's timeline rather than their own body's signals. Frequent travelers face a similar issue since unfamiliar bathrooms, long flights, and disrupted routines all encourage delaying the urge until things feel more convenient or more private. People who deal with anxiety around public or unfamiliar restrooms are also more prone to this pattern. If using a bathroom outside your own home feels uncomfortable, it's natural to push through the urge and wait, even when your body is telling you otherwise. Over time, this becomes a learned response that can carry over into situations where a bathroom is actually available, because the habit of waiting has become automatic rather than situational. Diet plays a role as well, though it works alongside this habit rather than replacing it as a cause. Low fiber intake and inadequate water consumption both make stool naturally harder to pass, which means that any delay in responding to the urge has a more pronounced drying effect than it would with a well-hydrated, fiber-rich stool. This is why two people can have the exact same habit of ignoring the urge, but one develops impaction and the other doesn't notice much difference. The habit sets the stage, but diet can determine how quickly the consequences show up. Reduced physical activity is another contributing factor. Movement helps stimulate normal contractions in the intestines, a process sometimes referred to as motility. People who sit for extended periods, whether due to desk jobs, long commutes, or limited mobility, often experience slower movement through the digestive tract to begin with, which compounds the effect of delaying the urge even further. Age also plays a role, though not in the way many people assume. While fecal impaction is often associated with older adults, this doesn't mean younger people are safe from it. Age can reduce muscle tone in the pelvic floor and rectal area over time, and it can also reduce the intensity of nerve signals overall, meaning the urge to go may already be somewhat fainter before the habit of ignoring it is even factored in. But younger adults who consistently override the urge, especially combined with low fiber intake or a sedentary routine, can develop the same pattern far earlier than expected. Certain medications can also increase the risk, particularly those that are known to slow down digestion or reduce the sensitivity of nerve signals in the gut. This includes some pain medications, particularly opioid-based options, as well as certain medications used for other unrelated conditions that happen to have constipation as a side effect. If you're taking any regular medication and also frequently delay the urge to go, the combination can accelerate the same process described earlier, since the stool is already moving more slowly, and now it's also sitting for longer than it should. When this pattern continues unaddressed, the consequences can extend beyond simple discomfort. Chronic straining, which often develops as stool becomes harder to pass, can contribute to hemorrhoids, since the repeated pressure affects the blood vessels in that area. In more advanced cases, impacted stool can put sustained pressure on surrounding tissue, and if left untreated for a long period, it can even affect the muscles and nerves involved in normal bowel control, making the entire cycle harder to reverse the longer it continues. The good news is that this entire process is built around a habit, and habits can be adjusted. The most direct step is simple in concept, even if it requires a shift in routine, responding to the urge when it happens instead of postponing it. This means treating that signal as a priority rather than an inconvenience, even when the timing feels inconvenient. Alongside that, increasing fiber intake gradually and drinking enough water throughout the day helps keep stool at a consistency that's easier to pass, so that even if delays happen occasionally, the effect isn't as pronounced. Regular movement, even something as simple as walking daily, supports natural motility and can help offset some of the slowdown caused by long periods of sitting. For people who have already noticed reduced sensitivity to the urge, retraining that response is possible, though it takes patience and consistency. One approach many doctors recommend is setting aside a consistent time each day, often shortly after a meal, when the body's natural digestive activity tends to increase, to sit and allow the process to happen without rushing. This isn't about forcing anything. It's about giving your body a predictable window and a calm environment so it has the best possible chance of responding naturally, rather than trying to squeeze in a rushed attempt between other tasks. Over weeks and months, this kind of consistency can help restore some of the responsiveness that was dulled by years of delay. It's also worth paying attention to posture, since something as simple as body position can make a noticeable difference in how effectively the rectum empties. Elevating the feet slightly while seated, using a small footstool for example, changes the angle of the rectum in a way that can reduce the amount of straining needed and make full evacuation easier to achieve. This is a small adjustment, but it works with the same anatomy that's been discussed throughout, and it can meaningfully reduce the physical effort required, especially for someone whose rectal sensitivity has already been affected. For most people, Adjusting the habit itself, combined with better hydration, more fiber, and more movement, is enough to gradually reverse the mild to moderate effects of years of ignoring the urge. But there are situations where stool has already become significantly impacted, and home adjustments alone aren't enough to resolve it. Signs that the situation has moved beyond simple habit changes include severe abdominal pain, an inability to pass any stool or gas for several days despite trying, noticeable swelling in the abdomen, or ongoing leakage of liquid stool combined with a hard mass that can sometimes be felt in the lower abdomen. In these cases, a doctor can assess whether the impaction needs to be addressed directly, sometimes through methods that soften and remove the stool in a controlled way before the underlying habit changes are even likely to be effective on their own. This isn't meant to be alarming. It's simply a reminder that severe symptoms deserve direct medical attention rather than extended at-home effort. What makes this particular habit worth paying attention to is how disconnected it feels from the outcome. Ignoring an urge for a few minutes while finishing a task doesn't feel like it should have any lasting effect. There's no immediate discomfort, no obvious warning, nothing that signals a consequence is building. That disconnect is exactly why this pattern can continue for years without anyone recognizing it as the root cause of ongoing digestive discomfort. Most people experiencing symptoms like straining, bloating, or infrequent bowel movements look first at their diet, assuming they need more fiber or fewer processed foods. And while diet does matter, it's often addressing only part of the picture. The habit of responding to the body's signal in real time, rather than on a schedule dictated by convenience, is just as significant, and in many cases, it's the piece that gets overlooked entirely. Understanding this connection changes how a lot of ordinary moments look. The choice to wait until you're home, the choice to hold off during a long meeting, the choice to put it off just a little longer while running errands. These are small, individually harmless-seeming decisions. But your body is built around a system of timely signals and timely responses, and consistently working against that system, even in small ways, adds up in ways that aren't visible until they start to show up as physical discomfort. The relationship between this habit and stool becoming stuck in the rectum isn't about one bad day or one missed urge. It's about a pattern, repeated often enough, that gradually shifts how your body senses and responds to one of its most basic functions. Recognizing that pattern in your own daily routine is the first real step toward changing it, and that small shift, responding when your body actually signals you rather than when it's convenient, is often enough to prevent the entire cycle from ever taking hold in the first place.